Do you know if you have enough food storage? Do you even know how much food storage you have? I mean, how many days will it cover the number of people in your household? Well, you know what? That's a pretty complicated question. And I'm going to go over some of the factors that you need to consider, and then 3 different food storage calculators that might help you calculate if you have enough. And then I'll share with you what are my findings. Have I met my goal? Stay tuned. Food storage. When is enough enough? I recently watched an excellent video by the old school prepper, and it was entitled Food Storage. How much is enough? And I'll put a link up here. And it made me think, how much is enough for me? And how much do I really have? How much food storage? How long would it last my family? So I decided to do a little research, and this is what I came up with. And it depends. Do you want enough food storage for 1 week? 3 weeks? 1 month? 3 months? 6 months? A year? Or even longer? Well, there's a lot of things to consider. And one of the things is, what are you building your food pantry for? What threats out there do you see coming? If it is a bad winter, snow, ice storm, and you could be up to 2 weeks at home, then you definitely want to have 2 weeks food storage, right? Well, maybe you live in more of a hurricane area and think of Hurricane Sandy. You might want at least 2 months food storage. Or maybe with the economy being kind of shaky, you're wondering what happens if I lose my job? Then you might want 3 to 6 months of food storage, or even longer. Or if you're like some of those that see doom and gloom on the horizon, you might want food storage for at least a year, if not longer, because basically if the apocalyptic events that some people describe, let's say EMP happens, then 1 year won't even be enough. So let's look into this a little further. It can be difficult to actually calculate how many meals your food storage would accommodate. Now, if you store MREs, then I guess it's pretty simple. Let's say you have 4 people in your household and you plan on 3 meals a day, although 2 might be planning, but let's say 3 meals a day, then this is how many MREs you would need for just 90 days, 3 months. You would need 1,080 MREs, and if they cost about $7 a piece, that's at least $7,500. So most of us couldn't do that for only a 90-day peace of mind. Plus, I have never eaten MRE, so I'm only talking about from what others say. But you have a limited menu then, you're eating the same thing very often, and I hear that it can give you indigestion and, let's say, bowel problems if this is something you're not used to. But kind of easy to count how many meals you have with MREs. Now maybe you're storing freeze-dried food in number 10 cans or in the little Mylar pouches, like Mountain House or something like that. Well, if you are, again, it could be easier to calculate how much food storage you have. If that's the only real food storage you're depending on, then just total up the total number of calories for everything in there and divide it by your family members' calories needs per day, and you can come up with an amount. Or you look at the serving sizes for each of those, and you decide if that serving size is sufficient. For instance, for some of them it'd be sufficient for me, but my husband would want 2 of those serving sizes. So look it over carefully, but again, you can come up with a number, and you can come up with what will meet your needs for 90 days. Maybe you've taken the most cost-effective method for food storage and you're just storing buckets of beans and rice. Well, 1 5-pound bucket can fit about 36 pounds of white rice, and a similar size bucket can fit about 35 pounds of pinto beans. Now, there are 590 calories in a pound of rice and 1,588 calories in a pound of pinto beans. So let's do the math. So we have 21,240 calories of rice in that 5-pound bucket. We have 55,580 calories of pinto bean calories in a similar size bucket. And that gives us a total of 75,820 calories. So if you figure 2,000 calories per person, it'll last for over 37 days per person. So you have, in 2 5-pound buckets, you have more than 1 month food storage for a person in your household. And that, again, very easy to calculate. But you may tire very quickly of just beans and rice, but it would see you through in a survival situation. Now, most of us have what I call the hodgepodge method of food storage. You know, if you're like me, you have some freeze-dried storage. You might have some MREs. I don't. I have some storage in my freezer. I have a lot of home canned goods and home dehydrated goods. And I also have store-bought cans and packaged goods. So I call it the hodgepodge method. And if you're like me, that hodgepodge method is much more difficult to calculate how many meals do you have in your food storage. How many people is your food storage supposed to feed? You know, if you live by yourself and it's just you, much easier to calculate. If you're like us, we're a 2-person household now, but kids don't live that far away, and if something bad happened, could they and their families come back? Well, that really changes if I had food storage for 2 people, and now I need to have food storage for 11 people. So think about that when you're calculating your food storage needs. Now, your family needs could change, especially your long-term storage. You know, you can have a teen get to a certain age and he or she is just going to be a vegan, even though, you know, a month before they were eating Big Macs and that was their favorite food. And they can be very, very obstinate on what they will eat and what they won't eat. The same is true for a toddler who always loved peanut butter and now won't touch it. And you could say if they get hungry enough, they will. But studies have shown that's not necessarily true. But other things can happen. You've got your food storage, you're growing a little bit older, and one of you develops diabetes. So if you are 18 to 44, you have about a 3% chance of developing diabetes. 45 to 64, almost 14% chance. And over 21% chance if you're 65 or older. So that's something to consider, and you'll have to look at sugar content. Maybe you developed a heart disease where sodium content is important. Again, that might change what you need in your food storage. Also, a lot of people seem to all of a sudden develop a gluten allergy. They say in average healthy people, it's a 1 in 133 chance. Well, that's kind of high. The good news is if you're Hispanic or Asian American, it's only 1 in 236 chance. But that could happen. You don't know if something could happen and change your nutritional needs. So it's something to think about. So what type of emergency is it and how much activity will it require? You know, something I see that's almost a fallacy on a lot of prepping sites is they say, oh, you know, be careful about serving sizes. You need at least 3,000 or more calories a day depending on what the event is. Well, that could be true and that could not be true. So I'm 5'1", and let's say I'm 18 and that's been a long time ago, and I want to maintain a weight of 125 pounds. Well, let's look at the Mayo calorie counter. If I was a couch potato, hardly active at all, I could have 1,700 calories a day. If I was somewhat active, 1,850. And it's up to very active, 2,350 calories. But look at how things change when you get 65 or older. And I'm lying in this, I'm actually 66 now. At 65, that same weight, if you're on the couch only, 1,400 calories. Somewhat active, 1,550. And it only goes up, even if you're very active, only 2,000 calories a day. And you might say, well, what decides those different categories? And it has some examples here, look. Light activity is, walking or gardening. Moderate, fast walking, water aerobics. Vigorous activity, jogging, bicycling, or lap swimming. So it says if you're inactive, you never or rarely include physical activity in your day. You're somewhat active, you include light activity of moderate activity most days of the week, or 20 minutes of vigorous activity at least 3 days a week. And very active, include large amounts of moderate or vigorous activity in your day. I don't think that many of us in emergencies are often at that high level, right? I mean, look at now, the lockdown. People have complained about gaining weight, right? Because you're not getting out and doing the same amount of exercise, or maybe in your job that you were. So in a lot of emergency situations, you may be only in that somewhat active category, and that changes how many calories you need. Let's look at it for men a minute. Here's an 18-year-old man, 5'10", he weighs 165 pounds. He's a couch potato, and he's lucky. He can still have 2250 calories, and all the way up to 3,150 calories if he's really active. But again, it changes as his age changes. At age 65, still 1,850 calories if he stays on the couch, up to 2,600 calories if he's very, very active. So be careful when you come up with calorie determinations if you believe it's just 3,000 for everybody. And by the way, I think it's very unfair. I have the appetite of a grown male, an 18-year-old male. So it's very hard for me to keep my weight down, and I think many of you are in the same bucket. But the good news is, if you aren't expending as much calories, then your food storage will last longer, right, with the number of calories needed. The other thing to consider is a change. You might be planning on how you are now. And it could be that when your kids go to school, they have a free breakfast program or a free lunch, or maybe you're in the food service industry and you get a very low cost or free lunch while you work. Or maybe you're working and very often you just drive through for fast food. So it's not really in your grocery budget. So you have to think about these things, because if you're in an emergency where you have to stay home, you may have more need for food than you originally thought. And some people say, oh, you can't count frozen food in your food storage. And I say, baloney, of course you can. You have to know that you could lose any of your food storage. Frozen is part of it, but you should have some kind of backup plan, maybe a little generator, or in our case, Monday, we're getting our whole house generator put in, and it'll be a natural gas generator. Of course you could lose some of that food, but I still think you can count the meat, the veggies, and the fruit that you have in your freezers. Now also, the type of emergency matters. What if the emergency is more of a hyperinflation event? Well, in that case, it's going to go on for a long period. You're just going to be pulling occasionally on your food storage. You're not going to be eating it all up at once. So your food storage may last longer. It really does depend on the type of event. Now, if you're concerned with getting the right nutrition every day for every member of your household that's coming from your food storage, that again might make it much more difficult to calculate. And for the same people that say can't depend on your freezer storage, well, can you depend on any of your food storage? I mean, you could have a fire, a tornado, a hurricane, something that wipes out your food storage. That just can happen. It's good to have your food storage in more than one place, but most of us don't. And then one last thing, do you count if you have a garden, if you have livestock as part of your food storage? I have 6 chickens out there, all hens, and they are laying a lot of eggs, more than we can use, and we're giving them away to family and friends. But yes, I do consider that as part of our storage, and I do have food stored for them for a longer term period also. But again, that can change your calculation. So I think you're getting the idea. It's not easy to calculate, especially if you have more than one type of food. If you're like me and you have that hodgepodge method. Well, I think there are 3 different calculators you can use, and I've came up with these names. One is the bulk calculator, one is the calorie calculator, and one is the meal calculator. And let me show you what I mean. Oh, and I should mention, in the Show More section underneath this video, I'll have links to these calculators and websites in case you want to do your own research. Most of us preppers are familiar with the LDS store, where you could buy online, or in some cities you can go in person to purchase very reasonable cost food. And it is limited about the type of food that you can purchase, but they also offer online a calculator to calculate your food storage. Let me show you. So it's on the Provident Living Guide to Family Preparedness, their food storage calculator. So it's done by weeks, and I'm saying 12 weeks, right? Again, that 90 days, 2 people in my household, and no children under 12. So then I push calculate, and it comes up with this. I need 185 pounds, this is only for 3 months, of grain, which would be wheat and white rice and oats and corn and barley and pasta. I need 28 pounds of legumes, beans and split peas and nuts. 14 pounds of dairy products such as powdered milk, cheese powder, canned cheese, etc. And 28 pounds of sugars, like brown sugar and white sugar and molasses and honey. And leavening agents such as yeast and baking powder and powdered eggs, I need 3 pounds. Salt, 3 pounds. And that includes things like your table salt, but soy sauce and bouillon. And fats, like vegetable oils or shortening, canned butter, etc., 14 pounds. And water, 56 gallons. So as you can see, that's quite a bit, and that's only 3 months' time for 2 people. But it is under the consideration that you're making everything from scratch. There aren't any pre-made meals that you bought from the store that are pre-packaged and can sit on your shelf. Now, let's look at Easy Prepper's site. Another good bulk food storage calculator, and I'm doing the same here. And this asks me, I got 2 household members over 7, none under 7, and again, I'm doing that 3-month supply. So for here, it gives you an idea of what kind of grains to get. So it says I need 195 pounds total, 100 pounds of those is wheat, and 15 pounds is cornmeal. So you can see there's various kinds. And then it talks about canned or dried meats, and it gives you a lot of different suggestions. And it gives you an idea of what sugars you should store and how much, and your milk and dairy, fats and oils, your beans and legumes. So it helps you give a little bit, I think it helps you envision what some of those categories are and what you need. When it says grains on LDS, it doesn't mean you need the number of pounds of only wheat. So this site gives you a little bit better idea. So some people are using the bulk storage method. Now others use the calorie method. And by that, you go through your inventory, look at your packages, see what's the number of servings and how many calories, write it all down, and you decide what each person in your family, how many calories they need, and you take your total then of all your caloric inventory and divide it by the number of people per day and figure out how many days food storage you have. Whew, that could be very time consuming. Now, the other method is what I call the meal method. And really, if you're just new to prepping, it's a great way to start out. You write down maybe for a week or a month all the different meals that you plan for your family. And then you figure out how much ingredient you need for each of those meals. So then you get an idea of how many ingredients you need to make the number of meals you need for that time period. And it's great because it takes in consideration what your family enjoys eating, and that can be important. And there's a great calculator for that. Let me show you. It's on the Food Storage is Easy website, a great website for planning food storage and for food storage recipes. And it has an inventory tracker, so you put down your ingredients. Well, you can kind of see, and you figure, okay, what do you need for that meal, for your breakfast, what are you going to need for your lunch, what are you going to need for your dinner, and you can come up with a total amount that you need. But let me give you an example. Something my family likes to eat occasionally, just occasionally, is a Spam teriyaki and rice dish. And so you would have a can of Spam, which is, one can is 1,080 calories, and then you have some rice. This happens to be taco rice, but teriyaki rice. It would have 750 calories in it when you made it up. And that includes putting a little bit of butter in it, or oil. And then it has veg alls. And I usually use the bigger can of veg all, and that would have an additional 315 calories. So we're talking about 2145 calories, okay? So if for a meal, each of you would need 1,000 calories, that would be 2 meals, right? Well, I certainly wouldn't need that much. And maybe that would make it actually 4 meals for me. Depends on what your caloric needs are for the day and how many meals you're having. But let's say we add the pineapple here, chunks. It's another 350 calories, and it gives the dish a lot of nutrition, and it goes well with the dish. And maybe we add a can of kidney beans to it. So now we're going to have a total of over 2,900 calories in that dish. And if you split it up, you could have 5 different meals at 583 calories, or less meals depending on what your nutritional needs are. But can you see how meals can be extended, and it depends what you're adding to them? Again, that can get a little complicated, right? And of course, I encourage everybody to keep what I call the meal extenders. And that is your rice and your pasta and your beans and your oats, noodles, things like that, that you can add to a dish to extend it. For instance, I home can beef stew, and 1 pint of it is enough for my husband. For me, that would be 2 servings for me, okay? But if you put it over rice, that extends, and it could end up to be 3 servings for my husband, or maybe even more. So think about having what I call your bulk extenders in your food pantry. Okay, so you've seen this isn't an easy question to answer. How much is enough, and how much do you really have? And if you ask me that question, I have a very quick answer. I don't know. I really don't know. But when you don't know how much enough is enough either. You know, I have what I call my very long-term foods, and those are like my Mountain House and some of my LDS cases and things like that. That's put away, and that's just something that I really expect probably never ever to use. And then I have my pantry downstairs, which is more of an extended pantry, when I have a lot of duplication of items up here, and my home canned and dehydrated goods. And then I have my working pantry up here. What I do know is I have plenty of food for 2 people. If it changed to 11, my immediate family would come home, okay, then it would be much shorter. Now, I do have an inventory for those long-term supplies, for my home canned goods. I used to have one for my freezers, and I have given up. My husband just won't inventory things, and it gets so confusing. I'm afraid I don't do that. Instead, just periodically I take everything out and decide what we have to use, and I try to keep the front in the front of the freezer or on top of the chest freezer, things that we need to use shortly. And that is working for us. And then I keep things on my shelves, my pantry shelves, kind of in order, and I can say, oh geez, we're getting low there on kidney beans, I better buy some more. But I don't actually inventory everything on my working pantry shelves. So that's what I do. But I would love to know, how do you determine how much food storage is enough? And what is your goals for food storage? And have you met them? Anyway, comment below, and if you found a way to surely calculate what you have in your food storage, I'd love to hear it.